seeing how we are a science school, most of you will be actually working in APA citation process for the majority of your classes. So that's what we're going to use in this class as well. So the first part of this slideshow or this lecture goes over the background of why we cite, why we're using APA, things along those lines. The second half talks about the mechanics and what students often miss and details to pay attention to. So what does it all mean? So we know about MLA, APA. There's also CMS or Chicago and CSE, which some of you might use going into some of the science fields. And basically those are all just shorthand for the different types of citation practices. So we're using the American Psychological Association, which is APA. The reason why we're using APA is it was really created for the social sciences, including education, science, and a few of the humanities. Therefore, that's what we're using today. And one of the reasons why we're using APA is because it focuses on dates as opposed to just names, where MLA focuses really on the names, right? Shakespeare, someone's not going to kind of revise Shakespeare, right? So Shakespeare is the big name that you're working at. Well, with sciences, it's the date that's really important. So kind of keeping that in mind, it's really more focused on the date and name. So why do we cite? Well, we cite to build our ethos, right? To build our credibility to our readers or to our audience. And we also do this to give credit where credit's due. By citing, we are avoiding plagiarism. So it allows you to give credit where credit's due when you're summarizing, paraphrasing, or quoting. It's also to show consistency. So readers kind of know what to expect if you're using certain, let's say, theorists. They kind of have a general idea of where you're going, where your history is, things along those lines. And finally, it really gives your reader or your audience access to that source. If I'm reading the paper and you say something very interesting or something I want to follow up on, I can go directly to that source and read more about your quote or your summary or your interpretation of that text. So those are a lot of the reasons why we cite. So in APA, you're using citation in the text itself, so you have in-text citation. You also have that references page at the last page that has a list of all of your references that you used in the text. And this information orients the reader to your sources and your background and kind of where you're going once again. So again, that references page gives the full information, right? That in-text citation is just kind of a quick blurb, right? It's a shorthand of the full reference. So that full reference provides everything that a reader or audience member will need in order to find the full text. Everything that is cited in your paper must appear on the reference page. So this includes things like a video clip or an audio clip, any images or artwork, photos, quotes, summaries, anything else that came outside of your own noodle, your own brain, has to be cited. On the references page, it appears alphabetical by author's last name, and we'll look at an example of this shortly. So the main thing, and the reason why I'm talking about the references page, is because when you're actually doing research, you want to make sure that you have all of these pieces and parts with your research notes. The worst thing to happen is you get this fantastic quote that you can't use because you don't remember where it came from. So as you're doing your research, it's a great idea to always jot down the author's name, the date of publication, the title of the work. So if it's a book, it would obviously be, the title of the book. But if it's just a chapter in the book or an article in a magazine or an article in an anthology, you want to write down the article title as well as the chapter or magazine title. So all that information. And then you want some other stuff, right? Publishing information, where it's located, publisher company, page numbers, anything else that you might need in order to write a full reference. And then this will save you a lot of time when you sit down to write, that you won't have to go back and research this title all over again just to cite it. So again, we use APA because it really focuses on the dates, right, as well as the author. The way that it's written, it often uses past and present tense, but it's something that's written typically consistency within a section. So we'll get into that later. Don't concern yourself too much with it, but just make sure that your tenses are consistent throughout a paper. In my philosophy, I think citing is like math. It's formulaic. All you have to do is know where to go to find the formula and plug in the pieces in the right places, and it'll be absolutely formatted perfectly. But there are some nuances. There are things that students forget, right? So if you don't kind of carry the one when you're doing math, you get a different answer. Well, in citation, if you forget a period or if you forget a semicolon, it's wrong. So it's paying attention to those small things. These two websites, dianahacker.com and of course Purdue's website, Owl Purdue, are both fabulous resources for you to use. Both Word programs and RefWorks at the Consortium Library can do a citing for you, but you really have to check them because often that they are wrong. So they have some errors within the system. So please make sure you double check if you're using an automatic citation program. So here's some things that I want you to pay attention to. So I talk about in-text citation, and there's multiple ways that we can do this. So here, Mohanty is the author's last name. The full name is Chandra Mohanty. So Mohanty, the date of publication of her book, claims that the quote, right, and then we end the quote, we have the page number where the quote was found on, and at the very end is the period. So notice the punctuation, right, the quotations are just around the quote, the page number goes after, and then there's a period after everything. Another way to do this is called a parenthetical citation. So I'm not introducing the author into the sentence itself. So the author and the date will be that full citation. Therefore, write, quote, writing is itself an act marked by class and ethnicity, end quote. Now the full citation. I have the author's last name, the year of publication, and the page number, followed by the period. Okay, so let's look at example number 1. I've introduced the author. Right after the author's name is the publication. Very end of the quote is the page number, followed by the period. Versus one where the author's not in the quote, so it is at the end of the sentence with the last name, year of publication, and page number. The general rule with APA is that if you look at the big official book, it says that for paraphrasing and summarizing, you don't necessarily need a reference. However, for this class, you do. So please make sure that you have all references and citations when you're summarizing and paraphrasing. So because you're summarizing and paraphrasing, this can take place over multiple pages. So you're going to do a general citation. So it's just Mohanty and the year. So now I can reference the book and then go back to the book to see where you got this information from. So APA has a title page. It has a running head at the top of the paper. You'll notice on the running head it actually states running head. But it only does this on the first paper, on the first page, on the title page. After that, it just has the abbreviated running head, the abbreviated title at the top of the page. It also has a page number in the upper right-hand corner. In the center, you will have the full title of the paper, your first and last name, the university name, and for our class, I want a word count, okay? All that information goes right there, centered, in the same font that your paper is written in. It's not bolded, it's not underlined, it's not italicized, it's not an 18-point font. It's a typical Times Roman 12-point font. The main body of the text on the very first page, the title is centered at the very first line. The text is double-spaced throughout, and there are no extra spaces between paragraphs. You're going to use the in-text citation. All papers will have an abstract, and what an abstract is, it's the second page of your paper, and it is a very brief summary of your paper. So you're looking at maybe 100 words, right? Just a quick overview of what your paper's about. And at the bottom of it, you'll notice where it says keywords in italics, and it's the keywords of your paper. So those are basically like tags, right? So if you were to put something in Google to find your paper, what words would you put in to try to find your paper in Google? So that's kind of the idea behind the keyword section. Now let's take a look at the references page. There's an interesting thing about the references page. First off, again, we have our running head and the upper left-hand corner, page number in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see references is centered on the first line. It's not downspaced, it's on the very first line. And then it's listed alphabetically by author's last name. The formatting of this page is the exact opposite of a regular paragraph. A regular paragraph is indented on the first line, and then every other line is flush with a left margin. On the references page, it's the exact opposite. The first line is flush with a left margin, and every other line in that citation is indented. So you'll notice here it has the author's last name followed by the first initials, the year of publication, the title of the article, the bigger piece that's in italics that it came from, so if it was a journal or a book, the volume and page number. Please pay attention to periods, to commas, to semicolons, to what's in italics, to what's not in italics, right? So make sure that you pay attention to these things when you go to Owl Purdue or Diana Hacker and you're finding the formula for what you are citing. All right, so this is just a quick overview of citing and citation practices. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but it is really important. Plagiarism is a very big deal, and you don't want to be caught. My philosophy is when in doubt, cite it out. So using these tools and the websites that are listed on our course and in this slideshow will really help you to succeed in citation practices. All right, I look forward to seeing your papers.